Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Read TFOS, where I take old stories I've narrated and update into modern audio standards. This particular story is called Storage Hold 37B, written by T. Marcos. The Great Empire of Mawai commissioned 51 trading stations in the second half of the Grand Mawai year 4439. Of these stations, 5 were Grand Bazaar-class mecha depots, 13 were Golden Promise-class logistics hubs, and the remaining 33 were Trading Station Mark III-class outposts. In the 27th of these stations deployed during that sequence, there were 23 Imperial Trade Service public servants assigned along with 136 contractor employees. The contracted employees, hired as they were from a variety of backgrounds and sentient resources agencies, were several different species, experience levels, and outlooks on life. On the first day of official habitability certification, the inspectors sent a clipped all clear to the waiting convoy of shuttles fresh from Muwuma. The first to debark was the civil servants, led by a rather rotund specimen of the Mumwish, who looked torn between happiness at his new posting and a bubbling, lurking horror that this may actually be a peak of his civil service career. Following the cadre of administrations was a deluge of contract workers, from lumbering great seops to flitting, gossamer winged to Some paused as they entered the foyer to sniff at the faint hint of off-gassing fresh sealants and gasketing, others to take in the muted expressiveness of this foyer itself. Last off the shuttle, wearing fresh creased overalls in an imperial blue and white, was Benjamin Anthony Givens. Ben, as his friends would call him if they passed beyond the realm of the theoretical, was the sole sanitation and reclamation tech JG on the station. His day-to-day responsibilities included direction of the maintaining bots, diagnosis and repair of biological waste processes, and other related tasks. Not the most glamorous posting, he had thought when reading it over, but the pay was decent and it came with free room and board, plus more wide postings had notoriously excellent healthcare services. Strolling down the fresh hallway, his soft-soled boots squeaking softly on the bare metal decking, he trailed a hand along the walls and felt the discontinuities between the panels, the soft corrugation of the speaker grills and ventilation ports. He didn't own it, but as he figured the responsibility for its function meant that at least a portion of it was his, the non-monetary intangible portion, as it were. He smiled and cracked his back, stretching and looking up and down the corridor. Yes, sir, he said to himself, this could work out just fine. In the second business quarter, the Grand Marie year 4440, the decadal jubilee brought modestly increased station profits across the board. The increase, coupled with a relatively clean record vis-a-vis customer compliance and misrouted cargo, triggered an automated performance enhancement subroutine in the sector manager's computer system. It dispatched a message to the station administrator, which noted how pleased the sector manager was at the fine job they were all doing, and congratulated the administrator on the 5,000 Imperial credit bonus attached, and a personal thank you for a job well done. The administrator, for his part, received the message in his own computer system. A subroutine therein passed the message, delivered a brief notice to the administrator status queue, and gave the automatic disbursement of 5 Imperial credits to each of the staff's pay packets, with congratulatory note. Ben was walking back from a lunch break. Carbohydrate substrate with aquatically sourced protein, think of tuna salad, more or less, when he noticed a bubble in his communicator and saw the good news. He was already quite well situated financially. His salary was modest, but it was matched against his positively aesthetic expenses. He decided to use the extra windfall to buy himself something nice. The selection of goods on a station such as this was mandated to fulfill a committee-established guideline on a baseline consumer and light industrial materials availability. This meant that it was, by definition, somewhat mediocre. There was not much that Ben saw within the self-defined budget that would present a significant improvement to his happiness, environment, or health. Then, passing by a display of interior personal decorative supplies, he spotted a small pot of Telexian ivy, an unassuming green plant like many others on offer. It nevertheless displayed a pleasing symmetry of leaves and tendrils, and was promised to be a long-lived, dependently evergreen fixture in your moderate to bright office or home environment. Pleased, Ben tapped his comm to the payment plate on the stall and grabbed the ivy. Ben was authorized to keep a stock of discretionary work-related supplies in storage hold 37B, a below-decks hold which was dedicated to maintenance and system storage per the official station blueprints. It was entirely too large for what he generally needed at stock, so he had cleared an additional area to the right-hand side of the hold as a workstation. Upon this workstation against the wall, he set the ivy. The light was good enough here, he reasoned, and he didn't use the upper part of his deck for anything. The leaves spread cheerily under the light, and Ben poured some water out of his neglected drinking cup into the growth medium. He regarded it for a moment, smiled, then went to start his weekly check on the water reclamation systems. In 4452, the station changed administrators. The old administrator, driven to an uncharacteristic work ethic by the prospect of a second 10-year anniversary aboard his station, had finally succeeded in a transfer to a post closer to Moima. His replacement was shuttled in, bearing a familiar look of expectant pride and horror upon seeing the space bulkheads of his new charge. He walked the station tour and dutifully met all of the departmental heads and their staff, making culturally appropriate greeting gestures and ensuring them that their department was critical to the successful function of the station and the glory of the Great Mui. Near the end of his rounds, his route led him to meet Benjamin Gibbons, Sanitation and Reclamation Tech 1, in his duty station within Storage Hold 37B. He met Technician Gibbons and issued an appropriate greeting, ensuring him that his duties were crucial to the proper operation of the station. Ben thanked him for his thoughtfulness and remarked at his appreciativeness for the detour given the administrator's assuredly busy schedule. The administrator, despite being in complete agreement with the sentiment, disagreed at length and issued a notionally redeemable invitation to drop by his office and discuss any matters that were troubling him. Ben thanked the administrator again, and with that he was on his way. As he left the storage hold, he caught a parting glimpse of something he didn't notice during the conversation, a Talaxian ivy. If he wasn't mistaken, trimmed and shaped to perfect symmetry, and spreading across the right wall of the hold. He made a note to have him take it down, as it was a non-regulation and could potentially damage the bulkhead. However, naturally forgetful as he was, that was the last time he spoke to Benjamin Gibbons or visited Storage Hold 37B in his 15-year tenure as administrator. During the third business quarter of 4479, the 51 stations built together 40 years prior were all up for their first long-term review and systems check. The majority of the review was a survey and detailed analysis of the larger stations, but procedure was followed for the smaller outposts as well. A robotic courier was dispatched to each of the Trading Post Mark III stations on the list and returned with detailed maintenance logs, as well as holographic scans of every room, corridor, and exterior hull plate of the station. All of the images were fed through the computation algorithm to find what people from Ben's neck of the woods might call a Bayesian deviations from the standard wear and tear on the station. Exceptions were found and routed to a central maintenance processor for review. For the majority of images, she recommended an appropriate degree of commendation, rebuke, and/or maintenance, and went to the next one on this queue. One image, however, left her at a loss for an immediate response. She stared at it for a few seconds, not able to parse the contents at first, then spread her coronal feathers. You may imagine her widening her eyes in astonishment. Still at a loss for what to actually do about this bizarre deviation, she hesitated a few moments before pressing a striped green button on a console, then escalated the current ticket to her direct supervisor. Saurian was a travel writer with the Tapiri Sector Holojournal and was en route to the last stop in his tour of 5 planets, stations, and moons in the sector. The previous 4 points of interest had been, in order, a collection of sculptures made out of frozen helium, an assortment of miniature figurines purporting to represent every member of the Mui royal family back in the founding of the dynasty, a perfectly spherical lump of nickel in the size of a shuttlecraft, and the galaxy's largest chair, not accurate. His information on his 5th stop was minimal, save for that it was of particular biological and mathematical interest. Debarking at the unremarkable outpost, Saurian felt that one could nevertheless remark at the crowds and visitors to the foyer. It appeared as though nearly every terminus was full. Indeed, there had been a wait to dock, and the foyer was chocked with a mass of people that all seemed to be funneling towards a doorway cut into what was supposed to be a bulkhead between Section 3 and 4 of the station. With a sinking feeling, he realized that was where he was meant to go. Remembering that he had called ahead, he decided to try coming with the station administrator to see if he could jump the line a bit. Neither a short nor a long while later, the jovial Muish strolled up and clapped him on the hind shoulder before telling him to please come this way, if he wouldn't mind. He didn't. A service lift and a short access tunnel later, and the two of them stood in front of Storage Hold 37C, where a small placard on the door read, Benjamin Gibbons, and then Sanitation and Reclamation Tech 2. Bemused, Saurian gave the administrator an inquisitive look. The administrator laughed, then knocked smartly on the door. Some muffled noises issued from within. Then the door whispered open to reveal a somewhat stooped, leathery human in immaculate blue and white coveralls. He stepped out of the hold, which appeared to actually be a tidy office of sorts, and greeted Saurian warmly. His voice was sonorous, if pitching up somewhat in his age. After some basic pleasantries, he motioned to Saurian that he should follow him into the next hold. As he slowly shuffled down the corridor, the gathered line of people took notice and stepped respectfully aside to permit him passage. Saurian was completely composed in his mind of what awaited him through the door, but as it slid open and he stepped through the threshold, his mind dropped what he was holding. Verdant tendrils encircled the entire hold, spiraling across every surface and doubling back among themselves to create intricate, looping designs. Serrated leaves flared out from the vines, spanning and whirling in intricate patterns. As he traced the complex striations and spirals, he was struck by the realization that every vine, leaf, bud, and tendril was precisely symmetrical. He turned slowly, his eyes splitting back and forth across the line of symmetry before feeling drawn upwards to the very pinnacle of the room where a colossal golden scarlet flower sat, petals unfurled over a span larger than he was. Layers and layers of rich incarnadine and what Ben would have termed a nice butter yellow overlapped and twisted among themselves as they exuded a faint perfume that suffused the room completely. Saurian lost track of time, but knew it had only been moments since he stepped into the room. Tears staining the corner of his eyes, he stepped back out and permitted the next guest to enter. Ben was there, smiling broadly. "Well," he said knowingly, "how do you like my ivy?" Saurian shook his head. "It's beautiful," he managed, still a bit choked up from the experience. "It's like standing inside a fractal or in space between mirrors." Ben nodded. "She likes growing in a fractal," he said, "although I do have to trim a bit here and there to keep it in order." Remembering his reason for the visit, Saurian took his pad out and started taking notes. "I have to ask, though, what made you start growing the ivy?" Ben sucked his breath in between his teeth, thinking properly about this response, just as he did every time he was asked this question. "Well," he said eventually, "I decided that I was going to get myself something nice to spruce up the place." A pause. Not sure if he was being subtly mocked, the journalist tried a different tack. "I don't mean any offense, but why did you decide to grow this plant here? What was so special about this room?" Ben laughed, wheezing softly and shaking his head. "People always ask me that question. I grew it here because that's where I was, of course." Saurian, now quite sure that he was being had, opened his mouth to his object, but stopped as Ben chuckled again and kept talking. "People always seem to think that you should put something beautiful in a beautiful place," he said, "but that's not where you need it. You asked me what was so special about this room." Saurian nodded. "Nothing at all," Ben said with a smile. "Not at first." End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.